Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Jude Kelly. I'm the founder of the WOW Women of the World Festivals. And thank you very much. And the reason we're sending Leila away is not because she has an infectious disease, but because we're expecting Hana, who we're dialing in, we hope. Because Hana, who some of you might know is the vice president of the Afghan community in Greece, actually had to fly home because, sadly, there she is, her father was ill and died, and she's now coming in from Iran. So we're very grateful that you're here, and we're very, very sorry as well for everybody and your family. So we're just going to introduce an amazing group of women, and the subject is global resistance and also how unexpected activism can be. Because most people, thank goodness, are not born into global resistance movements. Some are, of course, but very often it's the fortune you find, and then what do you do? So I'm just going to introduce, on my right-hand side, we've got Leila Alikarami, who is an Iranian human rights activist and lawyer. Lived in Iran for many years, but then came to the UK in 2008, I think, to do a one-year PhD, and then was unable to return home, which we'll talk about as we go along. Hana Ganji, who I've already introduced. Hana, welcome. And then on my left, we have two women who are kind of collectively known as the Janes, but they do have individual names as well. So Eileen Smith and Diane Stevens, and they're both called the Janes because of the movement, the collective movement of the member of the abortion counselling service that was set up in the late 60s, early 70s, called the Janes, and we'll talk about what that is and how it came about in a minute. Most of us in this room, I would think, have not had a situation where, well, how many people in this room, I'm going to ask you a question you might not want to answer. How many people in this room have knowingly broken the law for good reason? Okay, quite a lot of you subversives, right. I won't go to breaking the law for not good reasons. How many of you have actively known that your life was under threat because of circumstances? Okay, a not insignificant handful. And how many of you have wondered whether if your circumstances became truly dangerous politically, whether you would be able to sort of stand up and be counted? How many people have wondered whether they would be able to do that? Yeah. So, this is, I think, one of the reasons why we are endlessly interested in global resistance is not just because, our hearts go out, our sympathy goes out, our kind of sense of human justice goes out, but also our kind of imagination is set alight by both the hope that we would be able to join them and the fear that we might not be able to, if you see what I mean. Because human courage is something you never really know until you're there. And I'm speaking specifically about the WOW festivals and the setting up of them. I can honestly say that when I set up a WOW festival to discuss gender rights in the UK, I never thought my life was under threat, and it never has been. However, the first time we set up the WOW in Pakistan, Sabina Mahmood, who was going to take the WOW festival forward in Pakistan, was assassinated. The time that we went to Somaliland to do the WOW in Somaliland, a fatwa was taken out against me and the woman who set it up, and I had to leave the country. I don't believe my life was under threat, but hers certainly was. So there are moments when you suddenly realize that, interesting encounter with ideas is one thing. Actual liberty and justice and life is a completely different environment in which to operate. And so the conversation with the people here today really is about that. And I am fortunate to only have the outskirts knowledge of it. I'll just say that because, it's not been my story. So we're going to start with you, if that's all right, because we don't know how long your internet will last. So we thought we'd catch you while it was going. So Hana, we've been talking a little bit about how unexpected activism can be. You start off in your family, you're living your life, and then things happen, and you are catapulted maybe into circumstances that turn you into an activist unexpectedly, or maybe you come from a family or a history of it. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to all of you. I would like to appreciate from these that organized this discussion and great festival. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Hana, girl that is witness of injustice against women rights. I am victim of sexual violence, and that's why I decided to leave second country, because my nationality is from Afghanistan, and I was born in Iran, and I grown up here, because now I am in Iran. And I decided to came in Athens 3 years ago, and I was there.
So you came to Athens 2 years ago? Yeah? You came to Athens 2 years ago? Yeah.
3 years ago, 2020.
Yeah. And did you feel that you had to leave because you were in a situation of danger, or did you feel that the things you wanted to discuss were not possible where you were?
I did. When I decided to leave this country, I was in danger, and I believe here is not safe for me. I didn't have any rights right now. I saw, because I'm here for a few days, and I saw every day. As a woman, as a girl, I am not free. I am not in safe place. When I am at home, my parents' house, or in society.
What part of Afghanistan were you living in when you left?
I was born in Iran. My parents left there, but I visit there. But I would like to say there isn't any rights for women. Mm-hmm. I came from a land that violence has reached unbelievable level. Who believe that in Afghanistan, a human as a woman doesn't have right to educate, doesn't get out alone and walk on the street? Who believe express themselves and others should take decision for them? Do you know girls in an age of puberty must marry, and single mother remarry with Taliban, and religion gives them rights for the men to have at least 4 wives. But religion mentioned that woman must marry with 1 man even if he is killer.
So
I think religion...
Yeah, keep going.
Ella, go ahead.
Can I ask you something? When you realized that the Taliban were returning to power, and that although they said, if you all remember, that actually, I think she's frozen? Yeah. I think she's Hannah, are you unfrozen? Yeah. When you knew that Afghanistan was going to return to Taliban rule, and you heard everybody saying, it'll be fine, we'll make sure that women's rights are protected, did you believe then that it would be as bad as it is now? Did you have any sense of hope?
Even I think I know, and we know very well, the Taliban is terrorists. They are terrorists, real terrorists. And how we can realize, how we can have hope or believe they are changed when 20 years ago they decided to kill women because they study. And they attack to school every month, every day, every moment. How we can trust them when they announce it, the girls cannot go to a school? How we can trust them? How we can find hope?
So you never
when they
trusted.
Said, and when they announced women Man rights is full, and woman has half of rights. How we can trust them?
So the women who are now in Afghanistan, first of all, I want to ask, you've gone home to Iran. Will you be able to come back?
I hope.
But you only hope, you don't know?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a tricky encounter because we are knowing now that Hannah's living in a regime where she's in jeopardy and she's gone back, as any of us would, to be with our family and not sure that you can return. And we know that many people fleeing from Afghanistan were promised safe havens all over the world. But we also know that that's not happened. Britain has a particularly bad history, incidentally, a tremendously bad history of this. In fact, there are huge numbers of Afghani women judges in Greece who ended up in Greece expecting to come to the UK, and then the UK hasn't found a way of bringing them. So we can talk about that perhaps later. But did you expect to be an activist, or have you found that you've had to become one?
You know, I believe I need to be activist because I saw many things like physical violence, sexual violence, and a lot of limits for women, for my sister, for my mothers, and for my sisterhood. You know, I decided to be, doesn't matter for future. Sometimes some people said it's not safe for you and it's very dangerous. Because I believe in Afghanistan and Iran, they don't have any rights and they don't know. I would like to say, I think many women doesn't know about their rights because it's for a long time that others limit them and they mention you are weak, you are unable, and man has the power than you, and you don't have to have educate, you don't have to decide it for pregnancy, you don't have rights for abortion and many things. And they believe they are weak. Sometimes when I spoke with some girls from Afghanistan or Iran, they don't know about their rights. They said, okay, that one is the rule of the world. And they believe they are weak. Why they... When in university and we study about the go to moon and everywhere to be as a doctor or engineer, everything, why they don't have rights to thinking about the be as an educator, as a students, because they believe they are women and they are weak. They don't have right to have a study.
Okay, so Hannah, we'll come back to you, we hope. Thank you for that so far. I'm just wanting to draw our attention to the fact that whether we're discussing sexual rights in Greece or whether we're discussing the right to have education at any level, it's all a connected pattern of telling women that their rights are here or their rights are there or the rights might get to there, but the same issue is out there all the time, which is our rights are conditional on an idea of whether religion, society, law, or family will let us have those rights. And you hear so many women, and I'm one of them, saying, oh, my dad was great because he let me have lots of rights. You know, most people praise men for letting them have as many rights as they can get. And, you know, we know we're not discussing, we're not anti-men, but patriarchy, that kind of big word, does actually say, in the end, we could pull all rights if we felt like it. But actually, do you know what? We're a country that prides ourselves on certain things, so we're going to give you quite a lot of rights. But if we change our minds, we'll take them back again. So, you know, one of the reasons for starting WOW was because I realized there were so many young women, and there are young women in this audience, who kind of go, well, we got our rights, what's the problem? And I would say, I'm old enough to see rights come and go. And don't think any rights for women are actually unconditional, because nothing in theology tells us that's the case. So I want to come to both of you, Eileen and Diane, because you're in a situation where you fought for your personal rights that sent you into a place of like political rights, and then you're back round the corner here discussing the same subject all over again, which is basically the right to a woman's bodies and her right to choose. The Janes, please come and see the film tonight. But could you just tell us, perhaps starting with you, Eileen, what situation you found yourself in personally when you were a young woman, and then how that turned into a political activism?
Well, first of all, is this working? This is working. I was brought up in the 50s in the United States, so I just assumed I had all the rights. And I assumed I was equal to everybody. And then when I found myself pregnant at the age of 20, not in a good place, very bad job, very bad boyfriend, and I knew that I couldn't have a baby then, and I thought, well, I have to have an abortion. And it was illegal, and that made no sense to me. I'm like, how can that be? This just seems wrong. And then I met other people who, had said, no, you can't have an abortion. I mean, that's illegal. So I found a group in Chicago, in an underground newspaper, an ad that said, pregnant, don't want to be called Jane. So I called this group and found out that I could get an abortion illegally, and that it was going to cost $500, which I didn't have, and that I was going to be blindfolded. And I was totally freaked out. I'm like, what? This is the United States. I'm like an independent woman, and I can't have an abortion. So I explained I didn't have the money, and they said, that's okay, you can pay it afterwards, you can pay us back. So I went to an apartment on the south side of Chicago, not knowing anybody, and was blindfolded and had the best medical experience that I'd ever had, because these people were so kind and helped me through the entire thing, explained everything to me, called me up afterwards to make sure I was okay. And I was so blown away. I was like, I want to work with these people. I mean, these people are standing up for something that just should be basic. So that's how I got involved with the abortion counseling service. And for the next couple of years, I helped other women have an illegal abortion. And, it taught me that I could be competent. It taught me that I could stand up and help other people in a horrible situation. So I didn't really plan. I mean, I grew up thinking that, I was a Girl Scout. I was, a little Catholic girl. I thought you should help other people. And I think that did kick in, but of course it kicked in around abortion, which is kind of odd, but that's what happened. And it just, it did change my life.
And Diane, you had a sort of similar story?
Well, my situation was pretty similar. I grew up in a working class family that was very conservative. I was really rebellious as a kid. I went away to college, but then I dropped out of college after, in the United States, the Democratic Convention of 1968. There was a feeling that change was in the air. I moved to another state, California, and I discovered I was pregnant. I knew I could not take care of a baby. I barely took care of myself. So I went to a clinic called Planned Parenthood, and they said, yes, I was pregnant, and the only way I could have an abortion was to have what they call a therapeutic abortion, which was I had to see 2 psychiatrists who would say I was mentally unable to take care of a child or go through the pregnancy, and a doctor who would say the same thing. And they had to present letters to a hospital board for me to have an abortion. I was admitted to the hospital. I was in the psychiatric part of the hospital to have a surgical procedure. I mean, I was glad to have it, but that's a pretty crazy way to get health care, that you have to be mentally ill. So after that, I returned to Chicago, and I wanted to do something significant. So that's the activism part Jude was talking about. I felt I could help women who were pregnant. I could do counseling. So I called the same phone number, and I said I wanted to do abortion counseling. And someone called me back and invited me to a counseling orientation session. And there I learned I would be joining an organization of women that helped women obtain illegal abortions. And that was how how it all began for me.
So, I mean, I didn't know this story until quite recently. I do know that all over the world still, in any places where abortion is illegal, there will be groups of women who are compassionate and loving and caring and believe in life, and that is why they are supporting women do something very difficult, and that these women are at risk, as you were, of getting arrested and being imprisoned.
Yes.
So, I mean, knowing that you were doing something illegal and kind of frightening, did you worry? I mean, did you actually think, right, well, I could get arrested, but I don't care. I'd rather do this. I mean, were you actively thinking like that?
Oh, definitely. We always knew that it was really, and I did. You know, I was young. I thought, oh my God, if my parents knew I was doing this, I'd be in big trouble. Would they ever even bail me out of jail? I didn't know. But we kept getting these calls for people that were pregnant and desperate. And that made us keep going. It made me keep going. It was like, okay, what's the likelihood? You know, you wait it out. Could happen, but hopefully it won't. So that, I think the need was so strong that, and I was young. And so part of it seemed kind of exciting that it was illegal. You know, I mean, which, later on I'm like, oh my God, I was nuts. But, so there was a double thing of being young, and then also the need was so great.
Okay, well, in that case, I can probably ask you a question, as abortion is increasingly illegal again in the States. You know, we all know that Roe v. Wade was the test case that allowed states then to individually decide that they would be pro-abortion rights. And that's now been overturned, which means that states can yet again decide individually to get rid of abortion rights. So leaving aside, whether or not you would feel competent to do abortions again, would you now do the same again?
Being older, probably I would think a lot harder about it. But I would certainly support other people doing it and do what I could to support that situation. But, I don't know, as it gets closer, I would probably say maybe yes. Because you know what I mean now that I think about it.
You heard it here, folks. What about you, Diane? Would you do it?
Well, yes. I mean, the competency part is certainly part of it, but when we were working, we were doing a surgical procedure, and now, of course, as probably all of you know, there are the abortion pills. Both Eileen and I have worked in healthcare for many years, and I think would be totally competent to be able to prescribe pills or help people get pills. We could, I could do that. As Eileen said, I was very young at the time I was doing that, and I was very naive. And I did get arrested, although the charges were ultimately dropped, and I only had one night in jail. But at that time, I felt I was a good person to get arrested, and if I had to go to jail, I didn't have children, I didn't have family responsibilities. If I were the one that had to go to jail, that was okay. And now, similarly, my children are grown. If I had to go to jail now, so be it.
Yeah.
Really?
Good.
Right?
Yeah, right. But, Hannah made the point, which is 20 years ago, she witnessed the Taliban saying, girls can't go to school. And then we went through this arc in Afghanistan that sort of looked like things were getting easier and getting better. And then the troops decided to withdraw, and they go, well, I'm sure the Taliban won't be as bad this time, which I didn't believe. And here we are back at square one, and a terrifying square one. So when you see Roe v. Wade overturned, and you see state after state now doing this, did you expect that to happen? I mean, did you have Hannah's skepticism about the tenuousness, or did you think it was rock solid, this right?
We never thought it was rock solid, because even very soon after Roe versus Wade was decided back in '73, each state started to come up with restrictions. Minor ones, more, the state isn't going to pay for an abortion. No, it can't. Teenagers have to notify their parents. One law after another became. So I really don't think I ever thought it would be completely overturned the way it was.
Yeah, same. Same. And even in places now where it is legal, there are barriers that are put in front of the women, what with, you know, all these barriers like they have to get an ultrasound, they have to talk to someone 72 hours before they can go to for the procedure, crazy stuff like that. And then there's also the anti-abortion people who will physically put themselves in front of women trying to go into a clinic. And that's where abortion is legal. So it's still very hard.
Yeah, so it was always a contested space, wasn't it? Right around the world. And, well, maybe we'll come back and talk a bit more about this, but, you know, one of the things that I think is difficult about activism is that people make it very binary. You know, like you are totally for this or totally for that. And, I mean, most women, like you've just said, I found myself pregnant, I couldn't deal with it, I couldn't cope with it. Most people don't go, oh, hooray, another abortion. Oh, great, an opportunity to have an abortion. I mean, that is not how women are, but it's almost presented like a kind of thoughtless, almost cavalier action, which I don't believe is true at all. And so, you know, the ability to put shame around rights, that your rights, is very strong. The shaming around just wanting your rights to exist, and how you try to bewilder women into thinking that they don't have these rights, they shouldn't have these rights, they don't need these rights, or these rights are almost blasphemy, which is kind of the territory that you're in, isn't it? So, Leila, you were telling us earlier that, you know, even at kind of 5, 6, you noticed that you didn't have rights, and that it was very personal very early on. Do you want to just talk about like the kind of inquiry you made with your family as to what was going on?
Sure. You know, I was born in Iran. Lucky, Hana, you're in Iran now. I haven't been in my country for 14 years, and I missed it very much. But yeah, as a young girl, grew up in Iran, I was facing discrimination in my personal life. And, you know, at earlier stage, you know, from my grandmother, actually. Maybe you also have the same grandmother. And she loves my brother more than me. And I didn't like it. I didn't notice at that time that is discrimination. But I was complaining about it, and I didn't like it. I was asking my dad why she's treating, you know, my brother, you know, she loves him, you know, more than me. Why she's making specific cookies for him, and when he's coming, she was coming to our place from a village. We were living in Tehran, and she specifically mentioned all the time that I miss my brother. Name is Ali Reza. I miss him, not me. And that's, you know, I was complaining. Anyway, but later on in school, I was going to school at the age of 7. I should wear scarf, cover my hairs. But that was not the case for my brother. I cannot, you know, ride a bike in the street. That was not the case for my brother. And later on, poor my brother, I was comparing the situation with him. But then, you know, when I was in high school, starting to read like articles, magazine, watching more carefully and seeing, wow, the discrimination is really rooted in society and in legislation as well. When I went to university and I decided to become a lawyer because I thought maybe if I become a lawyer, so I can take revenge. I can put all these bad guys in prison. That was, you know, from my childhood. So then I decided to go and study law. When I was at law school, oh my God. Then I realized, oh my God, discrimination, that was not my grandmother. You know, based on Iranian law, the age of criminal responsibility for girls is 9. You know, a 9-year-old girl is fully criminal she has fully criminal responsibility. And then I realized, okay, if you want to get divorced, okay, the man, you know, is the head of the family. Okay, he's the head of the family, so he can control everything. If a woman wants to, you know, study, want to work, travel, everything, man has control. You know, if an Iranian woman wants to get passport, the husband should give permission. Even if he's kind enough to get permission for the wife to get passport, when anytime she said that, okay, he can say that, okay, I don't want her to travel, so he can actually ban her from traveling. And you may hear that some of these successful women, like athletes, they wanted to live in Iran to play in international competitions, and they were banned from traveling by the husband because simply he was jealous. And he didn't, he said that, okay, his wife, despite all the restrictions, discriminatory legislation, discriminatory system, discriminatory practices, she is, strong, and she gained a better place in society, so they're always looking for excuse to harm, the woman. So, I think the context is quite different. You're from the UK, you're from the US, and most of you from Europe. But in the situation in Middle East, in countries in crisis like Iran, like Afghanistan, like Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, is quite different. Legislations are discriminatory. It's not only practices, it's not custom, it is not one member of the family, it's the system, It's systematic, the discrimination is systematic. And then for women, it creates a lot of obstacles and problems. Women becoming activists. I become activist because I wanted to change the situation, not only for myself, but for many other women around me. Because for me, it was really difficult to look at women who are suffering for basic rights. You've heard, most of you maybe heard about this women life freedom movement in Iran. A 22-year-old girl get killed by the morality police because she, didn't observe hijab, in a way that the government asked her. But that was not the first case, right? 15 years ago, I was a lawyer in a similar case. A girl, she was 27-year-old, she was a trainee doctor, she was, doing the training, and she was arrested in a park while she was walking with her boyfriend, and they put her in custody. After 2 days, they said, the police said that she committed suicide in prison. That was a joke, because I went to the crime scene and I visited the prison cell. There was no way that she could hang herself there. But they said that she hanged herself in prison cell. And they didn't allow us to read the case properly, to defend the family properly in the court. There is no justice for her. Her name was Zahra. But 15 years later, we all know about the case of Mahsa. And, unfortunately, this is, keep going. And it is, everyone now is saying that, okay, women of Iran, they are fighting for their rights. And I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so proud of Iranian women. And everybody now is saying that brave Iranian women fighting for their rights. But we started this struggle like in 1906, more than 100 years ago. And we never stopped fighting. But the problem is that these governments, dictators, the system that come to our countries, and anytime, any era, they are finding some way of justifying their acts. Sometimes they want to liberate women, so they are asking them, okay, you need to remove your headscarves, right? We had this some years ago during Reza Shah. He wanted to, force Western dress code in Iran. So they said, okay, women should remove their hijab. And now we have this Islamic government, they are forcing women to wear hijab. So the women autonomy over their bodies is like a battlefield. All the time, the governments come and go, and they find a way to, do something with women, either controlling. And I always say that is a matter of control, that is a matter of power, because mostly governments, are male, And even we have some female, but there is not much, as you all know. How many women head of states? How many women in politics and in, like high-level position, political position? But I mean, it's really, when we are thinking about gender discrimination or discrimination against women, we really need to think really deeply about the roots, about the cause, and what is causing all this problem, why we are not moving forward, why in Europe we are still talking about violence against women, we are still talking about discrimination. You have legal equality, right? But why still, the rate of violence against women is so high? Why still there is no women in real political participation? So these are really serious questions that we need to ask. And when we are looking in countries like Iran, like Afghanistan, we shouldn't say or treat them as different than us. Their problem is different. Or they are struggling with legal discrimination. They are forced to wear hijab or killed by morality police. Yes, the context is different. We are facing other level of discrimination. But I mean, when in now 2023, we are still talking about violence against women, gender discrimination. So something is really missing. Something is difficult here. So I hope one day we can end this kind of discussion. But for now, I'm saying the young generation also here, and we don't choose to be activists. We become activists because we care about our surrounding. We care of other people, and we don't want to be victim. And we have passion for doing things. And this is really important and beautiful, because we are human beings, and we should be, thinking about what is happening around us, what is happening in other countries. If a girl is getting killed in one country, we just shouldn't say that, okay, talk about her or remember her, but then forget the cause. We need to raise the question and ask to the extent that something real happen, some outcome come out of this. So when we become activists, because we feel what is happened. You did in terms of abortion because you were going through it. And I was in a country, in a town, in a society where I was witnessing what is happening around me, either in the earliest stage when I was a kid or later at university or school. And I was a kid when, there was a war between Iran and Iraq, and 8 years, all my childhood was during the war. And I know what conflict means. So when people are talking about, liberation or military attack or coming to a country to liberate those, people or nation, I always raise a question, and a, big question, because I always say that, oh, yes, they went to Afghanistan because they wanted to liberate women. What happened after all these years? And in Iraq, that was the same. They wanted to liberate Iraqi people, and they wanted to have democracy in Iraq. What is we are witnessing now in Iraq? And the same situation in Iran. We had 8 years of war, and you don't know what is the life under, attack. Every day, every night, you are afraid of your life. You don't know what is happening to you or your family. I have anxiety because of my childhood, because the things that I remember through those days. And this all affecting women more, because then later on you become a mother, so you carry all these things with you, and you want to raise a child. And then in the society as well, you want to, work with your colleagues, but this trauma, this, anxiety is with you all your life. So I think it's really it's really important for all of us here that we have this space to, learn from each other's experience, to recognize and to respect the struggle for women around the world. And the most important thing is really to think and to realize about the context. You see, when we are talking about discrimination, we need also to, pay attention to the context that our colleagues and our friends are living in.
Thank you. And in discussions like this, I think we always have the dilemma between, the dystopian kind of like total misery, oh my God, everything's terrible. And what I talked about this morning, which is nevertheless, with stamina, with determination, with collective agreement, we keep moving forward and we make change where we can. You have to have the optimism that you can make a difference. So on the one hand, you have, in Athens, I'm sure you've seen The Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, so The Handmaid's Tale television program, yes. But so there you have a very common thing, which is great writers tend to conjure up futures. They tend to be dystopian, they tend to be frightening, and they're warnings. And the warning in Handmaid's Tale is actually, don't think that a modern democratic society couldn't turn, like Elizabethan England, into a Puritan society where no one could go to the theatre, no one could dance, everybody had to wear black. This happens in societies, even ones that couldn't imagine. But on the other hand, you have incredible examples of activism for change, some which are successful and some of which get squashed again. And I think the reason why we're always saying, as in WOW, look for the connections, is not so that we can all be miserable together. That too, but that we can take strength from each other and realize that, Hannah's doing her work, that Leila's doing her work, that Dan and Eileen are doing their work, and that we all have got to be vigilant about rights. And you can't just say, well, it's fine, we've got them. Is it a bit sad for Pakistan? Good luck, Pakistan. You can't do that, because everybody's rights are dependent, as women, on a kind of circle of belief. And once the belief is broken in one part, it's very easy to break it in another. And in a sense, a battleground like abortion is an example, isn't it? Because Poland stood out for years to get abortion rights and then got it just at the same time as America is like taking it away again. And these are very confusing ideas, because we set out countries in our heads as being progressive or not progressive, but often the most politically able women are existing in countries where they've had to become very politically agile. So if you think about Northern Ireland, for example, which was a battleground for years, the politicization of the women, the Catholic women, was immense. Hannah, can I come back to you? If you come back to Athens, and we're assuming you will, we're all willing you to get back to Athens, what is it that you want Greek women to do on behalf of Afghanistani women?
It's different, as Leila said. We have under the system, the terrorist system, but other side, we need to show them we have rights and we are human. When we do something as a strong woman, they can believe they can do. We can be as an example for them. They need to share with them our idea, our strength, our power, to self, to invite them to join us, to ask them to join us, and to do like we did. We need to share with them because they don't know. When I spoke with them right now in Iran, they are refugees, they came from Afghanistan, about something, they said, they surprised, and they said, oh my gosh, that one is not correct. We cannot do, for example, we cannot wearing whatever we want. We cannot decide it for our children like girls. I met 2 days ago one lady. She was married when she's 16 years old. And they said, what happened to you? Why you had that decision to be married? They said, okay, I don't know, because my parents take a decision for me. We need to share with them some information. They don't have information about their rights, unfortunately.
Okay, so your idea is that it's important that women demonstrate the rights that can be had, and that we, in a way, don't just take them for granted, but we are actively doing our rights wherever we stand in the world. I mean, do you think that is true? Do women in Iran or Afghanistan or all these other countries, do they, I wouldn't say depend on, but is it important that they see that women in other parts of the world are exercising their rights? Do you know what I mean? Not just like having them, but knowingly having them, so that they can say, yeah, those are my rights as well. Is this an important exchange of rights activism?
We can frame it in other words,
Yeah.
maybe, because women, we are human beings, and everyone knows that something, what is good for them or what is bad. We cannot say, okay, women in Iran, they maybe for them being a second wife or third wife or, for them is okay. But, everyone understands discrimination. Everyone knows what is bad, what is good, right? So women in Iran, or in Middle East or Afghanistan, they are courageous. And because they don't have the rights, they don't have, they know the meaning of the rights, and they know what is good for them, and they are fighting for those rights. They are risking their lives. They know that if they are going to a street, maybe they are not coming back home. If they are asking for the removal of compulsory hijab and going into a street knowingly without hijab, they know they maybe get shot and killed, but they go for it because they know that they don't want compulsory hijab, because they know they want to say that no government have autonomy, control over our bodily autonomy. And they are burning headscarf as a symbol of oppression, because they see the headscarf as a symbol of oppression, they're burning it. So it shows that they know and they want to have rights, right? So when they are saying in other countries, women are practicing, they are enjoying equal rights, and because as I mentioned, there are thousands of, if you want to count them in legal discrimination and practical discrimination against women. But when they say, for instance, the simple rights in family or in criminal law, or the issue of compulsory hijab or abortion, all these things that is in the rest of the world is, women are enjoying, at least legally. So they said, okay, nothing is happening. So women are enjoying their rights in family, in for instance, UK or in the US or in Greece. Nothing is, no revolution is happening, no public disorder. So why? They are questioning why our government is imposing restriction on us. So we can say that they know that they need to enjoy equal rights, and they are saying that is practicing all around the world, most countries around the world, at least on paper, in legislation. Because one thing in Iran is that Iran is not party to the Women Convention, and we have discrimination in family law, in criminal law, in employment law, and for instance, women are not allowed to study certain subjects because, for instance, in the future they cannot vote, because as I told you, the man is the head of the family. So the government is saying, okay, if women become an engineer, for instance, oil engineer, and we are investing and this woman loves this subject and is going to school and study, become a very successful engineer, if the husband is banning her from traveling, and she needs to, from Tehran, to go to south of Iran to do her job, so why we are investing on her? So we ban it from the beginning, that she cannot become an engineer from the beginning, right? So that's the argument of the government. They don't want to waste their money. That's, in the end, a husband, instead of changing the legislation. But I mean, in Europe, in some country, women are not facing this kind of discrimination.
No, they're not facing that discrimination, but they face the implications of so much of this. So, we talked in one of the panels about the assumptions that are given to boys, like your brother. I'm sure your brother's lovely. But, the thing is that if you tell a boy that they're more important than a girl, then they will want that to be proved, in however it's proved. They will maybe take boundaries and push them, because they can. And we know the amount of violence that exists around the world. And there is no country, no matter how much rights the women have, it doesn't stop them being killed by their partners. It doesn't stop violence happening. So the underground, or the kind of the structural insecurity that women still live in is very clear. And I'm wondering whether you, as Americans, watching what's happened with it going back, and it's not just abortion rights, is it? It's other rights too. It's a kind of general feeling of pushing the woman back into family, back into, I suppose, I was going to use the word servitude, but I mean, it's a certain kind of idea about conservatism with a small c, that women need to be respecting men and giving men more opportunities, etc. I mean, that language seems to have returned a lot in America recently. And just wondering, is it true, or is that my perception?
No, that is true. That is true. The last, 8 years especially have been very much like that. And, so many men are afraid, and so many people are afraid because things have changed. So I think that's what kind of riled everything up, besides just the basic political climate. But on the positive things, we've seen so many women and men come forward and organize and say, we're not going to put up with that. So, there's like the overriding thing, and then you've gotten, like, in Michigan.
Yes. When the actual people have a choice about things, when surveys are done, well, for example, 1 out of 4 women in the United States have had an abortion. So that basically means practically anybody you ask would know someone that has an abortion, So, and most people are in favor of abortion. They might have some restrictions, but most people are in favor of it. So just remembering that and giving those people the power, helping the people that have the sensible ideas and who believe in human rights, having them take that power. And as we've seen, like in a couple states, like in Michigan, there was a petition drive, and it was very successful, similarly in Kansas. So as people become aware that they do have the power to take back the legislation, I think that's what's happening now, which does give us great hope.
Can I ask a question about complacency? Because again, this is not to kind of blame ourselves for just wanting the opportunity just to enjoy our lives and not to have to be on the barricades all the time. But do you think that there was an assumption that we've won these rights, they'll never go back, and therefore we took our eye off the ball? I mean, do you think that there is a sense that maybe this agenda was coming up behind us and we didn't notice?
I don't think we realized how determined and sneaky. I think we didn't realize how determined and sneaky sounds like a terrible word, but that the other side was in order, to take away those rights. And so I do think we took our eye off the ball. And, then once it became clear, and then we started studying it and realizing, whoa, we should have known this more.
Yeah.
I think it's like you went along and things were going okay. And, maybe a little bit here and there, but no, I think we were too complacent. Yes.
What do you think, Diane?
Yeah, I agree that the very conservative people in the United States were playing a long game. You know, they helped, they did this thing, gerrymandering, that's been going on, appointment of very conservative judges, that's been going on. And these conservative judges are so young, I feel like they're going to be with us forever. You know, but they were playing the long game, and maybe we were a little bit too satisfied with the gains that we thought we had made, you know, like having Obama be the president. I mean, I thought that showed that our whole society had changed, but, you know, clearly that was not the case.
No. And the longer game that people who want to remove rights play, I think is very easy to underestimate, because I suppose, you know, the essence of freedom is that you just want to enjoy it. You know, you want to eat ice cream, go boating, make love, you know, be happy.
Yeah.
And actually, people who are busy being activists when there seems to be no reason are actually quite irritating, aren't they? You know, people say, oh, come on, don't be so heavy. Do you have to? Oh, no. And, you know, it's really a conflict. It's a big conflict, because the people who then say, well, we told you, you feel, yeah, well, you know, but I don't know, how do you maintain consistent activism when the landscape looks like there's no problem? I mean, how do you do that?
I do other things as well. You know, we manage. You know, that's the beauty of life, because at the same time you're struggling, you want to change the situation, but the other, you know, hand and other side, you're a human being. You want to enjoy, and you want to, you know, and this is really important.
Relax.
Because you want to relax, and this is really important. I always tell activists, because if you don't have the energy, if you are not a happy person, how is it possible for you to make a world a better place? If you are not in peace with yourself, how you want to make the situation better, how you want to make the peace. But I also appreciate the situation, which is really difficult. Many times when I came out from the Revolutionary Court, when I was there to, you know, defend a woman who considered to be a threat to national security because she asked for, you know, gender equality, she was asked for equal rights. When I was coming out from the courtroom, I was crying. I was sitting outside the courtroom, and I was crying for like 10, 15 minutes, and then I was going. Because for me, it was really stressful and it's difficult. But I continue, I keep going, because it's important. And I just wanted to also mention one thing about, you know, you're all aware there's a lot of literature on feminism and different theories and how we see gender equality. But one thing that I think is important for us to really find a way to negotiate with our fathers, brothers, husband, kids, whatever, the male, we need to include them. Because as you said, we love men, and it's not that, you know, all women who believe in gender equality, they want, because I had this you know, experience when I was teaching men in Iran about the root of discrimination, and I was talking about gender equality. Some of them, they really think that at the first. They were thinking that we want to be, you know, not equal to them legally, but we wanted to have more rights than them. And they didn't want to give it up. And I was saying, no, who said that? This is misinformation. And I was telling them, even we don't want to be similar to you, because this is nothing that I want to be similar to. You know, we just want to have, you know, I want gender, not a basis for discrimination, right? I think sometimes even, because now it was mentioned during the discussion that the younger generation male are pushing back because they are afraid. They think that we want to occupy their position, we want to, you know, replace them, and we just need to create dialogue. We need to find a way to negotiate, to discuss, to involve them. It's really not helpful to exclude them, because I hear sometimes they say, okay, male had enough terrible, and we shouldn't give them space. We shouldn't involve them. But I think we maybe need to, think a bit about this situation, and we need to include them, and we need to negotiate with them. And we don't want to be similar. We want to, because being a woman is really beautiful.
Improve. We want to improve the world.
Situation, the legal situation.
So let's hear from you. Questions and thoughts about issues to do with resistance. I think there are some microphones. I'll let you just choose people. And if you give her sweets, she'll come to you.
Hi. I wanted to ask actually 2 questions. I have lived in Saudi Arabia for 3 years in the past, and I had a lot of interesting conversations with women, local women, but also Pakistani women, Iranian women, Afghani women. And it seemed to me that the problem was not about their awareness, whether they know what women can do or not. Most of them had traveled abroad, they had studied abroad, they had seen what is going on. But there was some sort of, let's call it Stockholm syndrome, that made them believe that this is what they should be doing. We also have it here in Greece, and I see it in other countries as well. It seems that we just don't want to get out of this. We don't dare to get out of patriarchy. We don't even know the terminologies, conservatism, puritanism, sexism, misogynism, chauvinism. All these things are very confused in the women's heads. So I was wondering, what is the role of psychology complexes, issues that we have on this? Because in my head, it must play an important role, but I would like your opinion as well. And also, you mentioned that we should include men, and I agree with you. But what happens when they end the conversation with extreme lines, such as, this is God's will? How do you discuss on this? Because this has happened to me many times in various countries, whether they are men or women.
Okay.
There comes a dead end where you don't really know how to continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the 2 questions are, what happens when you're discussing with men and women, actually, sometimes, and they say, well, this is God's way, which is like the closed, the trump card. Excuse the word trump, sorry. The ace card. What happens when that happens? And then the other question is that, you see women highly educated, certainly in the Middle East, amazingly educated, and yet they sort of feel, and it's not just in the Middle East, everywhere, like you said, Stockholm syndrome, a kind of grooming that makes us kind of go, well, yes, but what makes me feel comfortable, even though I'm angry, is doing what I've always known to do. It's almost like a kind of return all the time to prison. So, let's just pick up this idea, first of all, of, you must have had many conversations with people where they kind of basically said, you're defying basic rules, you're defying basic ideas, you're flouting nature, you're going against God. These women's rights are unconscionable compared to what the universe has told you you're supposed to do. When you're having those conversations, if you can be bothered, what do you do? What are your arguments?
I usually end up saying life is really messy and hard, and we've got to be able to keep talking. I totally agree with that. And that always is not easy, because at some point I just want to get away from them. And then I've had to kind of talk myself down and say to myself, it's messy, it's hard, but stick with this. We're not going to end up on the same page, probably. But if you can keep talking to them and not close the door, it is hard. But that's what's going on right now, for sure, in the United States, and it sounds like even more so in other countries.
Dan, any?
It's very hard. It's very hard. And I admit I've had to walk away from conversations because especially that one about this is God's way, and if you say, well, that's not the way I see it, that really doesn't, I just try to be calm and not respond with anger to anger, and listen to people and hope that I can just, I don't know, be calm and be an example of a sensible person, and hopefully in the future, maybe their views will be softened. I know that's lame, but that's the best I can do.
And I also think one other thing that you brought up was that I think figuring out ways to nurture ourselves and our friends and the people that are in this together, making sure you go out to eat and enjoy it, and making sure that you take walks and, you know, go get a massage, you know, all those little things that keep you going. And don't forget those things, because it is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because if you
I
can-
often, sorry,
I was just going to say, if you can be centered in yourself, or if I can be centered in myself, that helps keep me from sinking to the lowest level, which is what I try to do.
I do think the word love is very useful, you know, because everybody says God is love. It's a phrase that every civilization uses, however they would describe their God or not. Even people who are secular, humanists, you know, naturists, whatever, there's always love at the center of this idea. And so I always think it's interesting to ask people whether they think that, like your grandmother, that God loves men more. If the answer is yes, I think you can walk away, because there's not going to be much of a dialogue. But I think if it's well, you know, when you say, well, what are the properties of love? So I think that we have to try to model the idea of what justice would look like to us, which I think would include love.
But one thing that we need also bear in mind, you know, referring to also the wording that we are using, I think negotiation is a skill, right? It's a skill. There is courses, university courses on negotiation. So when we are talking to people, we need to find, the common ground. So then from that, we start the conversation. That was a technique we were using in Iran when we wanted to talk to a religious guy, someone like Taliban, for instance, when we wanted to talk with them about the root of gender equality. So we were finding maybe a common ground, maybe bring something from the religion, the religious text, and saying that God create men and women equally. And then, okay, because there is a verses in Quran, for instance, saying that men and women are equal in creation. So how we are going to treat them differently? So we're finding a common ground. It is also going on with your brother's, father or male, your boyfriend, your husband. You need to find a way, a common ground to start a negotiation. And because sometimes we are not patient, we get tired or bored, and if we are not proving ourselves, we just move out from the conversation because we say we don't have time. And I don't want to convince you, and I don't want to, force you. So we also sometimes don't have the patience to go through this negotiation process, and that's make it, because we want an easy fix, an easy way. That is not possible. Maybe, and one thing about why women, it's not in the head of women. It's because, as we said, it's not a real participation, legal, real equality, because we are insecure, because there is a high, the ceiling for us, because we know that we don't get to the position, if we are also working hard, but there is a high, there is a, ceiling for us. So maybe this is insecurity that is not giving us this confidence. But we need really, now it's time for us, I think, to have this confidence, because if we don't believe ourselves, so there is always someone is, pushing us back. But when we are saying, every of us, I think we experienced, when we really firm and want to do whatever we want to do, we do it. Yeah. And no one can even, dare to come close.
But I think that your point as well about some of these places is that if you know that you're going to have to deal with your brother who will argue with you, your cousin who will argue with you, your mother who will be cross with you, your employers who won't agree with you, your friends who think you're too pushy. You know, that sometimes you just think it's too much. And you then are faced with, well, am I going to be a coward and back down? Or am I going to flip the argument in my head and think, well, this is okay, actually, this is fine. So, you know, I think that, I speak personally that as a woman, I often double think. I think, well, to keep the peace, I'll do this. And I'll tell myself that actually that's my choice. But actually my choice to do that is based on the fact that it would be so difficult not to do it. So you don't want to seem like a victim, so you make it your choice. And I think a lot of women have this thing going on all the time where the story that they're telling themselves is equality, the reality is not equality, and that's in everywhere in the world. And we are as much part of keeping up the pretense as everybody else because we can't look like we're the victims. It's insidious because it is grooming. Hannah, you must be listening to this and us talking about, having a chat in a pub with a man about God is love and then thinking about the Taliban and thinking, oh, yeah, sure. I mean, do you have a sense that there are some people, men mainly, where it is no point in trying to persuade? I mean, do you think there's just like some people cannot be persuaded and one shouldn't have the effort? Or do you think that everybody is worth having a dialogue with?
I think they believe everything is from religion, and they do with that reason. And they know their decision for women is not correct. But because they excuse themselves, they said, okay, that one is from religion and we need to follow. And they push the women from Afghanistan with that sentence. The religion said this one and that one and those one, They taken advantage for themselves, yeah.
Okay, I think that's interesting, isn't it, that you're saying, and I think this is often true, that a lot of men know that there's something wrong, but they have enough of an argument to kind of justify it. And you can sit in that space and persuade yourself that it's okay. Other questions, points? Who's got the microphone?
Hello, thanks for the interesting conversation. My question goes to all of you, but we talked about the long run that conservatism has played in the US, but also in other countries. And you wake up one day and you have no education for girls in Afghanistan. You wake up one day and women are being killed in Iran for not observing the hijab. And you wake up one day and not only you have Roe v. Wade overturned, but you also have control over children's books in Florida. And now there's discussion about not talking to girls about periods before the age 9, and just crazy things like that. And what do you think is the root cause of this? Because just saying that activism was complacent, it shouldn't be required in the first place. So how does a US society go from Obama to Trump in 4 years? And how does, in countries, Iran, Afghanistan, you see progress that has been fought for a lot, and it just goes back overnight. How does that happen? And the reason I'm asking, if you have insight, is because if we understand the how better, we can fight it better.
It's a really complicated question, of course, but I think fear of losing out, fear of somehow their rights being taken away from them. Like you said, that's not what it's about, but to them it seems like that. Fear of somebody working real hard and somebody else gets into college because they're black. Like in this, the press can really rile that up because it makes a good story. So the press has played a really big role in all of this stuff too, both right and left. I mean, I don't see anybody coming out really good on that. But a lot of fear.
I think patriarchy, I see the patriarchy as a root for all these things that you mentioned. And because we didn't tackle this systematically, We always, want to solve the issues at the time, but we are not going to the roots, And in some country, we fix it and say, okay, it's done here, and we are safe. No. Actually, COVID proved that is not the case. You cannot say, okay, the situation of women in Greece is okay now, but the immigrants are coming from other countries here, and they are bringing their culture. And from Greece going to UK, they are bringing their culture, and from Pakistan, traveling from, everywhere. So people are moving around, and this is not only virus that is, is going around. Everything is traveling. I mean, when we are, isolating ourselves, and we want to make the situation better for ourselves and our community, and we are adopting policies that is local to our country, that these are not helpful, because we are not, tackling the issue systematically. Patriarchy is rooted everywhere. And also the religious. We think that we are secular, for instance, in the West, but in terms of abortion, for instance, now we were discussing, what is this behind abortion? It's religion, right? So this religion is going to legislation or practice through people. The politician that we are sending to parliament, to Senate, they are, some of them, religious people. So they're influencing the policies with their idea and the thinking behind. So I think it's really important for these policymakers and for people, decision makers, when they are adopting policies, legislation, they need to have the global perspective. I think that is the only way, because now we are living in a globalized, situation. So we are, affecting each other through everything, even in social media, because everything is just traveling so fast. So we cannot close the doors and saying that, okay, we are solving the problem and it's done. No, it's multi-layer, and we need to tackle everything really carefully. It's making the job difficult, but this is the only way. Otherwise, next 10 years, we are discussing the same issues.
I actually think there's a parallel to women's rights, to black rights, to LGBTQ plus rights, to disability rights. All of these are rights that are placed in a hierarchical order, and kind of printed almost like into our DNA. I don't literally mean that, our DNA, but they are imprinted from when we are right from the beginning. That this is the hierarchy of rights. And interestingly, nature, the planet, is like underneath all of those rights. Until recently, we suddenly see, hold on a second, that maybe is not a good thing. And I'm not a theologist, I'm not lots of things, but I'm certainly not a theologist, but when you say, well, God created the world and he did it in this order, then you've already imprinted an idea of what's most important. And I think that our terror that maybe we've usurped the planet's rights for so long, and now we don't know what's going to happen, is an example of us taking this root of it's not just patriarchy, that's one of the major things, but it's all of those ideas of hierarchy of rights, and then we've just played them out. And it's incredibly hard to know, how do you upturn that? Literally, how do you say, let's have a scorched earth, start all over again, rewrite all theologies, or maybe no theology, let's rewrite the whole thing. And I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? That you're living the world we're in, and we're trying to invent a world that hasn't yet existed, whilst the world, as we try to reinvent it, kicks back. And I think that this thing about power, people keep on thinking of power as one big piece of pizza. They often say it's a pizza, and unless the pizza gets bigger, then people get very angry, because they say, well, you've got half of my pizza now, and I still need that. So we have to have this idea that rights can expand, and that the more rights there are, the better the world is. But as you say, that's a very frightening concept, because it sounds like, well, you're taking away some of my rights if you have rights. So, and because women, since that's who we're talking about, want to be kind, we also often say, I am taking a bit of your rights, but don't worry, I'll bake you a cake and I'll sleep with you. I mean, do you know what I mean? It's like, I am trying to get some of my own rights, but please don't think I'm being nasty. In fact, I'll give you more rights if you can give me some of mine. And so this negotiation is often really confusing because you're trying to tell somebody not to be frightened by giving them more rights. I speak personally. I can't tell you all the cakes I've baked. But it is not something that can be solved intellectually or by logic, I don't think. It's something that has to happen. So let's just flip it a minute and think about why, we all became activists because something hurt us, either actually or, morally, and we thought that's not okay. We have to do something. So for women's rights to become more potent, does it have to be something where men suddenly think, I can't have that happen to women? Is that something that is happening? Do we see men beginning to feel that pain, not for them, but for women? Is that something that people have seen? I'm asking. I'm not that pessimistic. Yes?
I think that I have seen some...
Here's a microphone.
Oh. I think that I don't know how to use this. It sounds strange to me.
It's fine.
Okay. I think that I have seen some bright flashes lately from the modern, let's say, generation of men actually at least displaying what you've just said. But it all comes down to the cake. I mean, when they feel that they are missing out on something, when they feel like that, it comes down to what we already knew before. So there are I have seen some nice lightnings, but I think that it has to do with being human. If a person reaches the point of understanding that he or she or whatever is human, not sexually oriented to find his identity. If he, she, whatever, comes down to understanding and identifying himself as human, I think that then he can open up an internal or external dialogue in order to understand the other person.
Okay, so in other words, if we could collapse gender more than we do, it might...
Or if we could stand up from another standpoint in us.
Okay, we got time for one more question.
Sorry.
Hello. I listened to your stories about Chicago, and it took me back to my study years, my college years in Chicago in the late 90s. Unfortunately, I had to have an abortion there. Fortunately, it was legal. Still, you had to face all these people going in and out, the anti-abortionists, etc. I think I'm going to agree with you. I think we underestimated all that. So it got to this point today where red flags are going up all over the world, like some countries in Europe and in America. So my question is, do you think women in Europe and women in all over the world, of course, and in Greece also, have to start fighting from today because before this issue knocks on their door? Because as you can see, in Greece, we might have this right today, but we already have the signs of this right being revoked from us the church, certain organizations have started a talk around this issue. So that's my question. Thank you.
I think, yes, that's a good idea to be super vigilant and be prepared. Some states in the United States have declared that they are abortion sanctuary states where they are welcoming women. You know, they have guaranteed, you know, to the best of their abilities that there will be no change in the laws and, in fact, will support women. Oh, what do you think?
And I think being vigilant is just so important because we obviously we weren't good enough in that. And now we're all trying to kind of catch up and go and also be aware of all the insidious ways that those kind of groups can work. Because in the United States, they're setting up clinics saying they're going to help you if you're pregnant, understand problem pregnancies, and you go in and it's all anti-abortion. You think you're going to get the whole picture, but it's not. And basically, you know, they don't tell you anything about abortion and that it's safe, that it's legal in places. So, you know, being aware of all the little ways that they can kind of creep in. Yeah.
I would get more men involved as well, and, you know, the whole thing about, well, it's men's babies as well. Women's right to choose, but men's right to help women choose. So I think that we need to keep making these movements broad churches all the time. So we need to wrap up, but I mean, one of the things I think is, you know, I hope that's come out of this and thing that I'm constantly aware of when I travel around the world with WOWs is that if we happen to have rights at any point in the place that we happen to live in, we are very lucky, and we shouldn't squander them, and we shouldn't take them for granted, and we must never patronize another country by thinking, well, the reason they haven't got rights is because, you know, they are this, that, and the other. That's not the case. We all stand in different points of history and political geopolitics, and, you know, if we don't attend to each other's stories and think this is happening to them and they're only like 5 hours away on the plane or less, then we really are being naive. And so I asked at the beginning, you know, who'd willingly broken the law, and some of you, I think, you know, were happy to have that history. But I hope, I mean, Hannah's gone. I hope she can come back to Athens, but she's not. Oh, no, there you are, Hannah. I hope you can come back to Athens. But the fact that you don't even know is a matter of shame, isn't it, for us all? But I hope you can come back. And I hope that, we'll all be back next year for the next WOW, thanks to Ellie and her team. And can I thank I don't know the signer's name, but I should do. Brilliant. Thank you. And whoever's doing the translations as well, of course, brilliant. Yeah. And do come and see the Janes tonight, the film. And also, I think Maryland is on. And Hannah, you want to say the last word? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I would like to say something about, we had a discussion about abortion. It's very, you know, I am very happy. We have a great lady they did many years ago for these rights, but now we had a lot of challenge. I think if we have a limit for the challenge, the abortion is the last one and 100th step, you know. Now we are fighting for education. We are fighting for wearing the clothes. We are fighting to be married bigger than 20 years or 16. You know, we have a lot of challenge in Iran and Afghanistan. We don't have any rights for life. But now we are discussing about abortion. We cannot, my country and my homeland, we cannot decide it for pregnancy. If they have girls as a child, they shame them for themselves. They didn't burn as a boy for first child. You know, we had a lot of challenges. Abortion is the last one for my homeland. Unfortunately, we cannot have education. We cannot go outside. We cannot go in anywhere.
Yes, completely understood. Yeah, completely understood. Every right will feel absolutely mind-blowingly important depending on what place you are in your life and in your country at the time. We have to fight for all rights. Thank you.
Thank you.